Hello, hello, everyone. Kimsey here, and I am so glad to be here this morning, getting back at it with my weekly lives. So, I've got an exciting talk today that I think will be relevant for a lot of women in particular listening. And that is about the transition into perimenopause. This is something that is talked about, but not enough. And frankly, a lot of doctors don't even know how to support women going through that transition. And I'm not knocking doctors. I'm just saying very recently, a lot more has been coming to light about what that transition entails, including even shifts in metabolism. So that's what I'm getting into today. We'll be talking about what are some of the key hormonal changes that are happening in that transition. What is perimenopause? Like, what is actually taking place, and why do women go through perimenopause? Then we'll talk about the hormonal shifts. Then we'll talk about how you can best support your body nutritionally through lifestyle to make that transition, and especially the transition from peri into menopause, as smooth as possible. And what are some helpful supplements that can also help smooth out or optimize that transition? So, looks like we've got some people hopping on. Thanks so much for being here. If you are watching me, if you're joining me live, or if you're watching the replay, it's always so meaningful for me to connect with my audience. So please drop a comment. Let me know that you're here. Perhaps share where in the world you're watching from. And then, as always, if questions come up along the way, again, either live or during the replay, just tag me in the question and I'll come back and make sure to answer it. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kimsey Berkwin. I'm an integrative nutritionist in my online nutrition and wellness practice called Progressive Health and Wellness, where I work with ambitious men and women who are struggling with their mental and physical health by taking a root caused body mind approach to optimize their overall wellness. The last housekeeping thing I want to say, for some reason, YouTube, so if you're watching me on YouTube, this message is for you. For some reason, YouTube keeps cutting me off early. It's like 7, 8, 10 minutes. And I don't know why. I can't figure out why. It seems like when you learn one of these platforms, something changes. So if that's the case, if you're watching this on YouTube and it cuts off for some reason, please go to my Facebook page or group. I'm streaming there too. Facebook page is Kimsey Berkwin, Bourquin. The group, which is the best place to go because that's where everything is archived too. So all of my talks, all of the informational posts I give, that's the best source of information. And that is Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness, a Facebook group. All right, everyone. So let's jump into it. So perimenopause, most women know that it's the interim phase before full-blown menopause. So what constitutes menopause is going for 1 full year with no menstrual cycle. But for up to 10 years before that, believe it or not, perimenopause can last up to 10 years. Sometimes it's a few years, sometimes it's up to 10 years. A woman may be going through perimenopause. This typically happens in a woman's early 40s, sometimes earlier for some women. It can be mid to late 30s. But what's happening is a shift in fertility. So, kind of some backstory 101. The ovaries, a woman's ovaries, one of their primary role, two of their primary roles. One, ovaries mature and release eggs, so the mature follicles that become eggs and release every month around on ovulation. It releases an egg to down, travels down the fallopian tube to the uterus. As we most of us know, right? If that egg is fertilized, it makes a baby. Ideally, simplicity, of course. If the egg is not fertilized, then we have our menstrual cycle and shed the uterine lining. So egg production, maturation, and release is one of the ovaries' primary roles. And then hormone production. The ovaries in our menstruating years, the ovaries are largely the source of estrogen production, progesterone production, testosterone. Testosterone is also produced by the adrenal glands, but testosterone as well. And so those are some of the big main hormones that are produced by the ovaries and two of the main roles. Now, a woman is born with the total number of eggs she will have in her lifetime, and that number varies per woman. There is a genetic component. So, women, you can glean some information by seeing when your mother, grandmother, etc., went through menopause, perimenopause. Um, but nonetheless, as that egg reserve starts to decline amongst a multitude of other environmental signals and factors, it will initiate the transition into perimenopause. And one of the hallmarks of that is when fertility is reducing, right? That's one of the biggest reasons for the transition is the decline in fertility. So the ovaries during our menstruating years, like I said, they're the primary producers of those key hormones. But when that fertility starts to change, the ovaries begin to pass the hormone production, if you think of it like a baton, to the adrenal glands. So the ovaries are saying, you know what, my time here is done. We had a great run at it, but it's time for me to retire. So, hey, adrenal glands, you take on the role of producing estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Now, the adrenal glands are also, these are two little walnut sized glands that sit on the top of the kidneys. They already produce a number of hormones. They produce different mineral corticoids like aldosterone, they produce adrenaline, the stress hormone cortisol. And so, if there, this is where stress comes into mind, right? Is how healthy is our adrenal function? How stressed out are we? How minerally balanced are we? All of these things nourish the, or affect, I should say, the adrenal glands. So, how healthy are those adrenals will influence how well they catch that baton, right? You can think of it like a coworker. If you're going to go off on vacation or retire, like semi-retire, and you're asking your coworker to take over your job, if that coworker is already completely swamped in their own work, there's probably going to be some things that fall through the cracks. Whereas that coworker, if they are balanced, right? They are staying on top of their tasks, they don't feel overwhelmed, then they're more than likely going to pick that job up and be able to keep up with your rules too. So that, in a nutshell, is essentially what is happening during perimenopause. Is a woman's fertility is declining, egg production is declining, and maturation is declining, which I'm going to come back to when we start talking about some of the hormonal shifts that happen. And in that transition, the ovaries are passing the hormone production baton to the adrenal glands. And one of the hallmarks of smoothing out the transition into peri and menopause is to make sure or support our adrenal glands' ability to take that baton and run with it. Okay, now, any questions so far? If there are, comment below. Let me know. Is this making sense? How is this landing with you so far? Okay, let's talk about some of the hormonal shifts that happen because I feel like oftentimes you just hear hormones are going crazy, but like, what does that mean? Now, obviously, there are, depending on the woman, there are a number of different hormonal fluctuations that can happen. But I'm going to try to talk to this as linearly as I can. So, one of the first shifts we see happen is a decline in progesterone. The reason why is because progesterone production largely happens in this, for simplicity's sake, in the second half of a woman's menstrual cycle after ovulation. So, what's called the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle after ovulation. What happens is when the ovary releases the egg, where that egg was released from in the ovary is called the corpus luteum. That corpus luteum is what then produces progesterone. So, what that means is we have to have ovulation in order to get that luteal phase progesterone bump. So, what should normally happen in menstruating years is that the ovary releases the egg, we ovulate, in other words, the corpus luteum starts releasing progesterone. That's intended to get to thicken, ripen the uterine lining as the egg travels down the fallopian tube and then eventually lands in that uterine lining. And so progesterone's main job in those post ovulation is to get the uterine lining thickened and ready for implantation if the egg is fertilized. When the egg is not fertilized, again, we shed that uterine lining, and progesterone levels drop back down. They don't go to zero, obviously. So the ovaries continue to produce progesterone through other cells, other mechanisms, not just the corpus luteum. But that's one of the biggest bumps that we will see. And you can easily measure that through blood work. You can measure that just from measuring your basal body temperature. Women's basal body temperature will elevate in the second half of their cycle because of progesterone. So, when in the transition into perimenopause, we're having more anovulatory cycles. So, what that means is more cycles where an egg is not released, or it may be released sporadically. So, like some women notice they get their period and then 2 weeks later they get another period, or they get their period and then they may go a month, not month wouldn't be weird, 2, 3 months without getting another period. And that's what I mean by anovulatory cycles. If you're having a period, you should be ovulating. That's what the period is, right? So you should be ovulating, but the frequency of that ovulation may change. Instead of happening monthly, you may go 2, 3, however many months without ovulating. And so, because of that, the overall levels of progesterone are going to decline. It's that decline in progesterone. We can see a lot of symptoms, things like insomnia, changes in sleep quality. We may see moodiness, like think PMS, right? We might see irritability, anxiety, annoyance, much less stress resiliency. So everything just feels like it's too much. There can be sometimes like cramping or other bodily sensations, lower body temperature. There can be water retention, bloating, breast swelling and tenderness. All of these are possible signs of not only low progesterone, but I'm going to talk about the role of estrogen compared to that progesterone in just a minute. So that lower progesterone can create symptoms in and of itself. But it's not just the low progesterone. It's also that progesterone in relation to estrogen, which brings me to my second point. Second hormonal shift that we see is estrogen dominance. So estrogen dominance is estrogen and progesterone balance each other out. Think of estrogen as very active, building. I think of it as a prolific hormone, whereas progesterone is calming, soothing, anxiolytic. So and in many different physiological ways, they balance each other out. So when there's this relative decline in progesterone, there's a relative that balance is skewed, right? Progesterone falls, but estrogen may or may not change initially, at least. So estrogen dominance refers to estrogen in relation to progesterone. So even if your estrogen levels are normal, they're healthy levels, it's that decline in progesterone that can create relative estrogen dominant symptoms. And that's where I mentioned some of the things like bloating, breast swelling and tenderness, weight gain, things along those lines. Now, it can be particularly problematic, and this is very common, if you happen to go into this phase of life with estrogen dominance in the sense of high estrogen. So estrogen dominance can refer to normal estrogen to low progesterone, high estrogen to normal progesterone, or high estrogen to low progesterone. It's all about the relationship to progesterone. But if some women are going into this transition with high estrogen, it's just going to amplify all of those symptoms. And the fact of the matter is, we live in a sea of estrogen, right? There are not only the estrogen that we're producing, but birth control is a form of hormone replacement therapy, essentially, especially if you're not necessarily taking it for birth control reasons. If you were just given birth control to, you had painful cycles or something like that, So birth controls can contain estrogen. Some women take hormones. Some women, it frankly is in tap water from all the women that are taking birth control or hormone replacement therapy. There are xenoestrogens. So those are estrogens in the chemicals in the environment that chemically mimic our, like molecularly mimic our estrogen. Those are particularly brutal because they've been shown to not only increase our production of estrogen, but they act on our cells as if they are our own estrogen. So it's like a double whammy. And we're talking like BPA, parabens, phthalates, found in everything from tap water to receipt paper to virtually anything plastic to personal care products. They're all over the place. And then we also have the microbiome. If there's imbalances within the microbiome, that can affect estrogen levels. If there's poor gallbladder function, poor liver function, that can increase estrogen levels. So there's a number of different ways that we can inadvertently end up with high estrogen going into perimenopause. Now, typically, a woman would have symptoms of this beforehand. So she may notice more. Some of the key areas where we would see is when estrogen is peaking. So, like right before and leading up to ovulation, or bloating, water retention, irritability, anxiety, insomnia, things like that. And then leading up to the menstrual cycle, water retention, breast swelling, and tenderness. So, there's some of the big ones that we would see really heavy menstrual cycles and long menstrual cycles, clotty, things like that. So, if you notice those symptoms and then they're getting worse and you're starting to have irregular periods, that's a red flag that there may be estrogen dominance going into perimenopause. And if that's the case, it's only going to be aggravated because of how at first progesterone is going to lower. Eventually, as women near menopause, estrogen should also lower, but the health of the rest of the body and the environment influences estrogen levels and estrogen balance. One other thing I wanted to mention about progesterone is maybe I can talk about that here in just a minute. Now, okay, just like a woman can go into perimenopause with estrogen dominance, they can also go into perimenopause with low progesterone already. That's something that we see quite often. Where in that luteal phase, a menstruating woman, is having suboptimal progesterone levels. The I'll say three biggest factors behind this: stress, 100%, inflammation, and nutrient deficiencies. All of those can drive having low progesterone, even in a menstruating woman. And so, again, that's kind of a recipe for a really rough transition in perimenopause and into menopause. If any of those hormonal imbalances are occurring in your menstruating years, it's only going to become amplified in the transition. The reason stress and inflammation and nutrient deficiencies can blunt progesterone or, subdue the progesterone response. Think of it like this. The body will always choose survival over sex. Progesterone is critical for fertility. And so if the body feels it's inflamed, it's stressed out, or it doesn't have enough nutrient reserves, it's probably not a great time to get pregnant, right? And so it will reduce progesterone basically as a safeguard against that happening. So if any woman is listening and you're wanting to get pregnant, that is definitely one thing to look at is low progesterone. Okay, so we talked about low progesterone, estrogen dominance, overt or relative estrogen dominance. Testosterone, I'll mention. Testosterone, we can see some fluctuations, but they're not quite as pronounced as it may be as estrogen and progesterone, or as it may become in perimenopause. So, since estrogen, the ovaries produce testosterone. I'm sorry, but the adrenal glands already do produce some testosterone too, and then fat cells can also help. Wait, actually, I've got that backwards. Never mind. Scratch that. Um, there are two different places where testosterone is produced. I will say the decline in ovarian function and stress and blood sugar imbalances are two big things that can affect testosterone levels too. But like I said, that's a little bit less pronounced. But some of the things that you would look for, like less sex drive, lower libido, difficulty with orgasm, less like motivation and drive in general. Maybe you're getting less from your workout too. So, like you're lifting weights consistently, but you're not seeing the muscle gains and you're not able to progressively lift more weight. Those can be some signs of lower testosterone levels. Okay, so how are some of the key ways that you can support your transition? One, if possible, get a view of your hormone. Where do you stand before? So if you're 35 and up, we'll just say, it would be beneficial, and especially if you're 40, I think 40 would be a really great time to start taking some proactive steps with this. Because I would say most often the transition happens after 40. Like I said, some women go through it earlier, but most often the transition happens after 40. And so if you say 40, if you're around 40, 41, 42, something like that, but you're still having regular menstrual cycles, none of these signs of perimenopause, I would greatly encourage getting a hormone test. I love salivary testing or the Dutch urinary test because then we're looking at tissue levels of the hormones and not just in blood, which is just showing what's circulating in blood at the time of the blood draw. So work with someone that can run a salivary or a urinary hormone test and get a snapshot. See what's going on, especially if you've got PMS or symptoms around your menstrual cycle. Get a snapshot and see where you are because getting ahead of that now will save you so much pain before you transition. So that is the best step to take. If you're listening to this and you're like, nope, sorry, my periods are already irregular. I think I'm already going through that. It's not like it's too late. It's all good. Some of the key things, what we're really looking to do are support those progesterone levels and we'll do that through like less stress, nutrient, like deep nutrition, nutrient density, and then also cleaning up. Is there inflammation? Like what is your gut health like, for example? What is your, have you been exposed to any kind of toxins like mold or metals or what is your environment like? Like, do you drink tap water and use like not clean personal care products? Do you use Teflon and nonstick pans? Like there's little easy steps that we can take to help clean up your environment, to help reduce that toxic load and therefore reduce stress, or I'm sorry, inflammation. So with supporting progesterone, we want to think less stress, nutrient density, reducing inflammation. And nervous system regulation is huge. That goes into the stress piece. With supporting estrogen levels, we want to think healthy fats, which is also important for progesterone, healthy fats, supporting your liver and gallbladder and bowel function. All of those are critical. So, specifically, one area nutritionally that we can do that strikes a lot of those boxes. And I would say if a woman came up and said, what is the best way that I can support my transition into perimenopause nutritionally? I'd be like, balance your blood sugar. Balance your blood sugar. Not only does erratic or imbalanced blood sugar increase inflammation, it is a form of stress and um, I can go on and on and on. It'll affect your fat levels, your visceral fat, your peripheral fat. That'll affect your hormone signaling. It truly is one of the best things that you can do. So, what do I mean by balanced blood sugar? What I mean by balanced blood sugar is you want your glucose to stay within this nice narrow range throughout the day. So anywhere from like 70 fasting up to really ideally no more than like 120, 130 after a meal, depending on the meal that's eaten. But if you're getting above 140, 150, we're having spikes. And below that, we're having hypoglycemia. So unless you're going to ketosis, but that's the other thing. So balancing your blood sugar. Do you have signs If you go longer than 3 to 4 hours without eating, do you become shaky, hangry, like ravenously hungry, like, "I need to eat now or I'm gonna kill someone," kinda thing? Do people joke about like, "Oh, to make sure, she gets her snack, otherwise she's gonna get hangry, irritable, etc." Do you get tired? Do you get kinda, like I said, shaky? Do you start yawning? Those can all be signs of imbalanced blood sugar. Do you crave sweets? Do you crave carbs in general? Do you crave sweets, especially after meals? Do you wake up in the middle of the night? Do you wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety? Those are all some key signs that your blood sugar might not be balanced. If you're looking at blood work, is your fasting glucose in the range of 75 to 90, or is it outside of that? Is your hemoglobin A1C above 5.2? Those are some other signs. Are your triglycerides higher than 100? Those are some other signs that there may be some blood sugar imbalance. But basically, how this pertains to hormones is progesterone. Take it like this. To support healthy progesterone levels, our body needs to know that it is safe. Period. That is the best way that I can say in a nutshell, how do we support progesterone? Our body needs to know that it's safe. If it thinks it's running from a lion all day, if it doesn't know where its next meal is coming from, if it doesn't have enough nutrients to perform its basic demands, it's not going to feel safe. If it's, well, yeah. So blood sugar aggravates that, particularly when it's dropping too low. So if you're having these episodes of low blood sugar with the symptoms that I just described periodically throughout the day, each of those drops they elicit the stress response, because ancestrally speaking, low blood sugar could very well mean famine. We didn't always know where our next meal was coming from. And so low blood sugar it causes a release of cortisol and adrenaline. We have 5 hormones that are designed to raise blood sugar if it drops too low. That's how important, that's how much our body doesn't want low blood sugar, right? So, anyways, we want to prevent low blood sugar, but high blood sugar is inflammatory. High blood sugar damages our blood vessels and our brain cells and leads to this cascade of events that's pro-inflammatory. So that's why we want that Goldilocks effect, right? We want it right in the middle. Now, I'm not going to go off hugely on all the different ways that you can do this, but I have given a ton of talks on this in my private Facebook group, Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. Go there and search blood sugar, and you'll find a ton of resources. Some of the things that I would recommend, though, one is to break your fast with protein. So, in other words, prioritize protein at breakfast. So that could be a couple of eggs with avocado. It could be a protein shake and a protein bar. It could be a protein powder blended up with like some blueberries and coconut cream. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but prioritize, I'll say 20 to 40 grams of protein, depending on the woman, at breakfast. Ideally, right around 30 grams of protein at breakfast. Next, have protein at every meal. Doesn't have to be animal protein, but have some kind of protein at every meal, because protein is more satiating, but it is a slow release fuel supply. So prioritize protein at every meal and aim for, I would say, 80 to 100 grams of protein total per day, again, depending on the woman. Protein is huge for a number of different reasons. Next, I always recommend getting away from snacking. The old nutrition advice used to be eat every 2 to 3 hours to balance your blood sugar. But like, if you look at the animal world, the only animals that are eating all day like that are the large herbivores, like cows, right? You don't see most other animals necessarily eating all day. So that doesn't balance your blood sugar. It props it up every 2 to 3 hours. It never gives your body a chance to improve or practice its metabolic flexibility. The body is designed to burn both fat and carbs. If we're giving it carbs all day long, it loses its adaptation to burn fat. We can get it back, obviously, it's not a permanent loss, but it loses that adaptation to burn fat. We become glucose dependent. And so that's why if you go longer than 4 hours without eating, you just crash instead of burning fat for fuel, which is how we're designed. So gradually, I recommend starting to avoid snacks. That can be 3 meals a day. For some people, for a lot of people, I recommend intermittent fasting, 14 hours, 15, 16, depends on the person. But so for some people, for women, if they're doing 16 hours, you may not have your first meal until noon, 11 or noon, let's say between 10 and noon. And then the second meal, call it between 5 and 7. And then some women, that's it. They just eat 2 meals. Some can still fit in 3. So it kind of depends. But the point being, specifically, I recommend going 4 to 5 hours without eating between meals. Okay, next, go for walks after meals. 10, 15-minute walk. Doesn't have to be long, but that can lower your glucose by like 20 points. It's an awesome little hack. And it's great too, right? You it improves your digestion, you get outside. So walk after meals as often as possible. Those are some of the key things. There's a few other things that you can do for balancing blood sugar. Like I said, I'll defer to that talk, but those are some key things. And what you're looking for is you can effortlessly go 4 or 5 hours without eating and feel fine. No symptoms, no ravenous hunger. You're fine. And we want to see your blood sugar levels, hemoglobin A1C between 4.5 and 5.1, triglycerides under 100, fasting glucose 75 to 90. We can get into like NMR conversations, but I'm not going to go there today. Okay, so that's one. And then the second biggest thing, the second biggest thing is anti-inflammatory diet. So minimal sugar intake. This goes back to the blood sugar balancing conversation. Really be conscious of the amount of refined sugar you're eating. I mean, sweets, desserts, things like that. There's going to be sugar added to different things. I generally recommend keeping that to no more than 6 grams of added sugar per serving per whatever that is. So if it's like a protein bar, protein shake, something like that. I'm not saying we need to demonize sugar completely. It's going to be in some good things, but you want to watch the desserts, you want to watch the frequency of the desserts, and you want to watch the amount of added sugar in different things. I mean, there's some wonderful granolas, for example, and this is fruit. This counts as fruit too. Fruit is wonderful, but if you're having 5 apples a day, it's too much. Keep fruit to like 1 to 2 servings per day. So just be cognizant of sugar. With the rest of diet, eating tons of vegetables, right? Dark green leafy vegetables, brightly colored vegetables. This will really help not only the nutrient density, but your liver. So when we're talking about estrogen balance, we want to support the liver hugely. So cruciferous vegetables are great: broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, etc. Sulfur-containing vegetables like garlic, onions, eggs. All of these support the liver. Dandelion tea, green tea. Again, lots of protein because the amino acids not only help blood sugar, they also support your liver. And then keeping, like I said, that sugar lower. So a whole foods diet, think Mediterranean diet, paleo diet, things along those lines, but a whole foods diet. And then lastly, and healthy fats. Oh my gosh, healthy fats. I almost forgot about healthy fats. Grass-fed, grass-finished animal products, wild-caught animal products, plant-based healthy fats like nuts and seeds and avocado and olives and olive oil and coconut and flaxseed and all those great things. Those healthy fats provide the backbone largely to which our hormones are produced. So that is critical. They're also great for dampening inflammation. By the way, speaking of this, I always feel so silly because I'm like, eat your vegetables, but truly, like, focus on a whole foods diet. I have a free 7-day menu plan, balancing hormones menu plan. If you want that is more specifics, right? Like actual meals, recipes, just comment menu plan below, and I'm happy to send that to you to give you something more substantial to work on. Okay, and then lastly is nervous system regulation. After that, I'll talk about supplements and then kind of monitoring your cycles. With this, you can monitor your cycles, but nervous system regulation is huge. So this is the stress piece. Again, we cannot produce healthy progesterone levels if the body does not feel safe. So, nervous system regulation seeks to help regulate the nervous system and shift it into a more balanced state as opposed to stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. There are a number of ways to do this, but I think what is most important is I'll share an interesting story. I wear an Aura ring and it measures the stress response through different biometrics like heart rate, HRV, respiratory rate. I was at the dentist last week and I hate the dentist. It stresses me out so much. And I'm in the chair and they're doing the scrapey thing, which is my least favorite part. And mentally, I'm so tense, but I'm breathing deeply and slowly through the belly. So to get through it, I'm diaphragmatically breathing. My eyes are closed and I'm just counting 4-second inhale, 5-second exhale, 4-second inhale, 5-second exhale. My Aura ring registered that time period as me being in a relaxed state. I was not relaxed, but my body, because of the breath work, was. My nervous system was okay. And I feel like that story, I had a huge takeaway from that. I've known, breath work, yes, nervous system, but that was huge. So, my piece of advice is check in with your breathing throughout the day. Set an alarm on your phone once an hour, goes off. Check in with your breathing and intentionally start shifting into that slow diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic means you're breathing through the belly, not the chest. So only your belly moves, not your chest, and you're prolonging your exhale. Inhale to a count of 4, 5, 6, maybe. Exhale to a count of, 5, 6, 7 seconds. That shifting how you breathe throughout the day is truly one of the best baseline things that you can do for your nervous system. And then I always recommend focused breath work too. So just like we want to move throughout our day, but there's also value in exercising. Same thing here, right? We want to breathe slowly and intentionally throughout our day and have some focused breath work where there are some wonderful free apps, right? Headspace, breath, using a guided meditation is a great way to do it as you're starting to get into this. But doing that for 10 to 20 minutes in the morning, at lunch, before bed, whatever it is, can be really phenomenal. It actually helps reset your nervous system and increase your heart rate variability, thereby literally improving physiologically your resiliency to stress when done consistently. So that is one of the best things I would recommend. The second one is nature time, outdoor time, getting outside, getting off a computer, off a device, getting out in the sun, going for a walk around your neighborhood, around a park if you've got trails. But time spent outdoors is another phenomenal thing to do for the nervous system. I can obviously talk about yoga, meditation. There's a million different things to do. I've talked a lot about heart rate variability, biofeedback training. Huge fan. But these are some of the easier things that you can incorporate into your day. And then I'll also talk about stress support through supplements. How's this landing? Do we have any questions yet? Is this making sense? If you're watching the replay, I'm talking to you too. Okay, so supplements, a few more things here. Supplements, some of my favorites are, again, we're focusing on nervous system regulation, quality of sleep, nutrient density. So magnesium glycinate, phenomenal. 75% of the population is deficient in magnesium. We need magnesium for healthy progesterone. It's used throughout the liver. The glycinate form has a calming effect on the nervous system. So it's great for sleep, anxiety. Take it before bed. Typically start with 1 to 600 milligrams. You dose it based on your bowel tolerance. So start with 100 milligrams before bed. If that affects your bowel movements the next day, if it doesn't, then increase by 100 milligrams each night. If you ever reach diarrhea, reduce until it goes away. Okay. Next, omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s, like I said, our hormones are built on a backbone of fat, specifically LDL cholesterol. So omega-3s help with supporting that backbone, but also help dampening the inflammation. And the brain, which controls our hormone balance, is a ball of fat, basically. Every neuron is insulated with fat. So omega-3s are huge. Cod liver oil, fish oil, either one. I recommend getting above 1 gram of a combination of EPA and DHA. Next is Vitex or chasteberry, same thing. Vitex or chasteberry helps signal your brain to communicate with your ovaries to support their ability to produce progesterone. So Vitex can be really therapeutic. If you've already entered the perimenopause phase. If you haven't yet, unless you have low progesterone levels in menstruating phase, I wouldn't recommend Vitex. But otherwise, if you've already entered into the perimenopause, or if you have low progesterone and you're still cycling female, then Vitex can be really helpful. And then vitamin D. Vitamin D is really more of a hormone than it is a vitamin, crucial for inflammation support. So this goes back to that stress piece, right? And the nervous system regulation safety piece. And then lastly can be adaptogens. They are herbs that help your body adapt to stress in a good way. So adaptogens can be particularly helpful if the stress piece is a big factor for you. I also love phosphatidylserine. Phosphatidylserine helps cells communicate, but it's also been shown to help lower cortisol. So some adaptogens, common ones are like rhodiola, ashwagandha, lemon balm, different mushrooms like lion's mane and reishi. All of these are different, astragalus, different wonderful adaptogens. And then if estrogen dominant, this would require testing. And if estrogen is truly high, not just normal compared to low progesterone, but if estrogen is truly high, combination of calcium D-glucarate and indole-3 carbinol can also be particularly helpful at supporting those liver pathways for estrogen detoxification. Okay, my last piece of advice is I think there is so much value in tracking your cycles. There's different wearables that allow you to do this now. So I wear an Oura ring. I know the Whoop strap does this. I think later models of the Apple Watch does this too. It tracks your basal temperature. So, and you can just use a thermometer too. You can just use a thermometer and take your temperature every morning upon rising before even getting out of bed. But tracking your basal temperature will allow you to see and follow what's happening within your cycle. When you ovulate, if you ovulate, what's happening with your cycles. So some women will start to see that their luteal phase or the follicular phase will become shorter as they are nearing that perimenopause transition. So I think there's so much value in tracking your cycles. And also you can journal like any symptoms that you're noticing around different parts of the cycle and really get an idea for how your body changes and how you change over the course of the cycle. All right, everyone. That's all I've got for you today. I hope that was helpful. So in a nutshell, the take home is that transition does not have to be difficult. I think if we go into it knowing more of what's happening with our body, we know better about how we can support it, right? What's happening with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and how can we support it by looking at the rest of your physiology and seeing what is helping and what's hurting that hormone balance. And if you're able to get ahead of the curve and take charge of that balance before you go into perimenopause, like I said, you'll save yourself a lot of pain going through it. But if you're not, it's never too late. It's never too late. All right. If you're listening to this thinking, I really think this is what's going on with my health, things have not been the same lately, and you want to know more about if you are going through that transition and how to support your body, I've included a link in this talk to schedule a free 15-minute discovery call with me. Just gives us a chance to get to know each other better, talk more about some of the symptoms you're having, goals, what you're looking for. And we'll talk, if it feels like a good fit, then we'll talk about how to get started. And if not, that's okay too. All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you next week. Bye.